So I hope you're all okay with that. I assume he has asked everyone. So if not, please let Ashley know. And the file will be shared with all of us afterwards. Questions, feel free to ask at any time. You could just sort of raise your hand or you could type into the chat box. Might be good to save questions, for example, the presentations at the end of the presentations, maybe. But if you know, you really get a burning question while Rakim and I are talking, just go like this and we'll stop and respond. And I hope it's useful. Obviously, we're all busy and you're giving your time and money to this session. So we've done our best to plan it to make it useful for us all, for yourselves particularly. So if I could ask Jackie to introduce herself and then the logistics of Zoom. Perhaps if I just mention each person's name and you could spend, please no more than a minute, just introducing something about your work and why you've come to the session today. So Jackie.
Hello, good morning everybody. My name is Jackie Moran, as it says on the screen. I was invited by Sheila to support this training this morning. And the reason why is because I used to work for a long time at Refugee Council as a career and employment advisor, and afterwards as employment advisor and head of employment in World University Service / WITAS. Unfortunately, that organization no longer exists, but I had very close ties with I guess pilot programs funded by the ESF on refugee and supporting them into training and employment. So that's my background. I do have a master's degree in career guidance and also a master's degree in social psychology. So that's me for today.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you.
I should actually add, sorry, I don't work for Transition. I'm an independent consultant.
Yeah, great. So I'm just looking at the list of participants from top to bottom. So that's how I'm picking people's names. So Helen Marshall, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hello everyone, my name's, as Sheila said, Helen Marshall. I work for Durham County Council as a refugee mentoring officer. I've been doing that role since 2016, and it's we support the refugees, they're mainly Syrian and Iraqi, as part of the refugee resettlement project.
Right.
Great. I cover the well, with my colleague Martin, we cover the whole of County Durham.
Great. And a very important point, which I didn't say, is please do share your expertise and experience. And one of the main objectives really is for us to learn from each other. Nobody knows everything, nobody's experienced everything. Every candidate's different. So yeah, thank you. Martin Kidd.
Hello, yeah, my name's Martin Kidd. So, like Helen, I work for Durham County Council, and I also have a grand title of Refugee Mentoring Officer. I've only been doing the job for maybe about 16, 17 months now. Prior to that, I've been a careers advisor, either as like a specialist or a generic since, I think it's 1989 I first got into careers advice. Mm-hmm. So as Helen said, we work with mainly Syrian and Iraqi refugees, and mm-hmm. Helen tends to do the north of the county and I tend to do the south of the county.
Right. Yeah, lucky refugees. Yeah. Yeah, in London it's really quite chaotic. There's not enough services. Yeah. Thank you. Alexandra?
Hi. Morning everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm actually a new careers advisor in Cardiff. I work for Careers Wales, and me and my colleague recently started supporting the Oasis Centre in Cardiff. So yeah, this is all rather new for me. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to learn. So yeah, as much as information as possible, that's what I'm going to gather from today.
Great, thank you, Alex. Thank you. Claire Brabham.
Hello, hi. I'm Claire Brabham. I'm the Kids Council. I've been Kids Council for 12 years, but more recently I'm
Claire, can I just say your microphone at my end is quite difficult to hear what you're saying. Oh, can't hear you at all now. Oh. Can't hear you.
Yeah, maybe if she types, maybe if Claire types it. If Claire's having difficulty with sound.
If you unmute for now.
She's on mute. Yeah.
On mute. I don't know. Maybe Ashley's doing that. Right. Try again. Oh, okay. We can't hear you at all now. Yeah. Jackie just. Little bit. Try again. Not really. How about you type on the chat an introduction? We can all read it on there. Very kindly.
yes.
Would you be able to type on the chat? Ashley, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi. Do you have any suggestions?
Other than using the chat, no.
Okay.
A microphone it's broken.
Okay.
Sounds of it.
Right. Claire, can you hear the suggestion of typing into the chat? I think your video's frozen now, isn't it? Oh. If you don't mind, we'll just carry on with the introductions, but I'll be watching your video to see if you come back. Someone called Elle Trower. If you could unmute and introduce yourself. Hi. Oh, there's the introduction from Claire there on the chat. Works at Gateshead Council as employment advisor, also on the refugee resettlement project with Syrians. Thank you. Elle Trower, can you hear me? Do you like, Lynn, right, yeah. Could you introduce yourself? Joys of technology. You seem to have the microphone on and the camera on, but I can't hear you or see you. Lynn, would it be helpful for you to put something on the chat to let us know what's happening or introduce yourself? Oh, there you are.
Lynn says she can't hear or see anything.
Right, thank you. Oh dear. Ashley, can you assist in any way?
Yeah, I'll talk.
Pardon?
Yes, I'm just talking to them now.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, great. Adele, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, here we are. Just joined late due to IT issues. Yeah, can't hear or see anything. So Ashley will be assisting Adele, hopefully. Is there anyone else who hasn't introduced themselves who would like to? I think there are 2 people who haven't yet joined. Well, shall we continue? Because obviously we're all here. So as I mentioned, there are a number of things we're hoping to achieve, and one of them is to identify most of or some of the things that can go wrong, and the barriers for this client group and also for we advisors. So Jackie has kindly agreed to take a few notes from this part of the discussion of brainstorming labour market barriers, and we will email this list to you afterwards as well, which might be useful for cascading to other colleagues. So if we start off with brainstorming some of the key barriers that refugee clients experience when they're looking for work in the UK. And if you want to just wave and then unmute and share with us 1 or 2 of the barriers that you're aware of for the next 5 minutes or so. Yeah. Hi, Martin.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the main one is just the lack of English,
right,
or the lack of English required for getting a job anyway.
For many clients,
yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. And the lack of ESOL classes, do you find?
Well, in County Durham, we're quite lucky in that we do have ESOL classes for all of them.
Great, great.
But that can be both a good thing and a bad thing, because some of them tend to stay on them too long, and it's not always the best way for all of them to learn. Like some of them learn well in a classroom, but some of them don't. They'd probably be better off doing something else.
Thank you. Very important point. Yeah, great. Other key barriers that come up for clients? Yeah, Claire?
Martin, oh sorry, Claire. Go on.
Claire, you're on, yeah. Sorry, can't hear you, Claire. So sorry. Just try again. Oh, do type on the chat, Claire, and we can all see it then. Yeah, absolutely. Helen?
I was going to agree with Martin. The main barrier would be the language, but we have had success where we've had people who have only a small amount of English go into opportunities and do well. So I think sort of the second one would be finding the right employer to give a good opportunity. So
yeah,
you can be really successful getting a good work experience placement, and if that person proves their worth and shows they're a hard worker,
yeah,
we've got examples where it doesn't necessarily mean you have to speak the best English ever.
yes.
But the second one I would think would be getting that really good opportunity with a good employer who's willing to give someone a chance.
Absolutely, yeah. Employer engagement, yeah, yeah. That often colleagues within employing organisations have all kinds of assumptions that the person needs to have IELTS level 9 English in order to work in any job, and it's not the case. Yeah, yeah. And also when people are on a placement or in a job, it's a really great way of fast tracking English as well.
Yeah, definitely. It works hand in hand, doesn't it? Because their English and confidence really improve.
Exactly.
And the employer often can, if it works well, and it's a hard-working individual, the employer can straight away see that actually it's about their skills, not necessarily how good they are at speaking English, and that develops alongside. Yeah. As the workplace work opportunity continues.
Depending on the job, obviously, some jobs, people have to have a certain level of English, but yeah.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So Claire has written barrier not understanding the job market. Yeah, and the recruitment processes. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of theory, this could be, I'll come on to you, Jackie. Yeah. Cultural capital. Not understanding what you might call the unwritten norms of how people find employment, how people conduct interviews. absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Jackie?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about people staying and continuously doing ESOL classes and not moving forward. I did have that experience when I was working as career and employment advisor. And one of the things that I did see that made a huge, big difference, I remember too, at that time, it was Iranian refugees I was working with, is that I said, do some volunteering in an care home. I mean, I know now we can't be doing that, but because old people, sorry, I shouldn't say that word, love to talk, and you will get the colloquial expressions, not just English, but English which is with the jokes and things like that. And these two young people they did the coffees and teas at a local home, and when they came back, I mean, their English improved incredibly, because also it was understanding the jokes,
So
and
finding ways to join society.
Yeah, exactly. And also to because again, not feeling pressured, oh, my English has to be excellent and I feel embarrassed, but because they're doing something, and so that sometimes that fear of going out and, oh, I'm going to make mistakes, and then people feel more comfortable staying in a class. That could be,
There's another barrier as well, is self-confidence. The ability to go somewhere unfamiliar by themselves or even with other people. Yeah, thank you. Maybe another couple.
I have a similar example of working. We've got several clients that have done exactly that in barbershops, but so picking up not necessarily the language you would learn in like a standard English in an ESOL class, but the language that people are using on the street. So the language you'd use in the barbershop is going to be completely different to what you'd learn in the classroom, and exactly that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I underestimated for a long time the importance of self-confidence of this candidate group, because I've only ever worked with refugee professionals, and many of them are very good at putting a kind of face on and looking quite confident. And then I began to realise from a lot of the feedback, people were saying the big value of the service was improving their self-confidence. Getting into a placement and making connections with people made them rebuild their identity, and it's easy, certainly I sometimes forget that, that people feeling they've lost their identity, and that's a big part of our role, is to help them rebuild that and feel like a member of society here. Okay, so barriers for we advisors. So I've just mentioned one that I personally have to keep an eye on. It's not assuming that the person's more confident than they actually are, and talking about that. What about other, you might call more sort of technical skill-based barriers for refugees at all skill levels? What holds them back from getting into interviews or succeeding in interviews, for example? It's not a test, I just don't want to talk at you all the time. Yeah, Martin?
Just needing to understand the UK jobs market, knowing how to apply, what's expected of them. So any time any of ours do go for an interview, we try to spend quite a bit of time preparing them for hopefully every eventuality. But as time goes on, we'll have quite a few who might be unsuccessful in an interview. So you pick up different things all the time. And, sometimes it's cultural misunderstandings or even just having to be there on time, some of them.
Yeah. Can you think of an example where it might be a cultural misunderstanding? Time is one, yeah.
Yeah, well, for instance, this last week I had somebody who went for an interview, and they were having to do a bit of like a health and safety test.
Yep.
But obviously they have to wear masks.
Yep.
This is a gentleman who wears glasses, so he just went in and he had his mask just covering his mouth but not his nose.
Yeah. Right.
And he was trying to argue with them, saying, well, I can't do this because my glasses are steaming up. but the trainer was saying, well, look, you have to have it over your nose because of the COVID thing. And I think because he was trying to argue the case, but it was maybe a little bit lost in translation. In the end, he got kicked out of that interview for not doing what he was meant to do. But I don't think he really meant to do it wrong. But I could see where he was coming from. But sometimes it's just like, well, you know, if they tell you have to do that, you have to do that, even if your glasses are steaming up and
yes, it's not a personal choice.
Rub them, so.
Safety. Right. Right. Yeah. Thank you.
But again, I had another one who'd just come maybe 5-10 minutes late. But again, they were, well, if you can't be on time, you know, it's not good for us. So.
And for some people, that is a cultural misunderstanding, isn't it? That in the UK, time is money. If it's 10 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock. Whereas in some other countries, for many reasons, it can be more flexible. My partner's Chinese, and we argue about that all the time. You know, his idea of 10 o'clock is 2:15, and that's fine for him. But my idea is 10 o'clock is 10 o'clock. So, yeah, thank you, Martin. I'm just reading the notes from Claire and Lynn. And so I'm sorry that some people can't join the conversation, but I hope you can hear us. And please carry on typing comments. Helen, did you want to say something?
It was just in addition to what Martin said in terms of the cultural misunderstandings and how it can be very different here. Martin had a client he helped prepare for interview, and I'm sure he was really pleased he did, because one of the questions that Martin had said, what might you ask at the end of the interview? You know, those all important questions that you can turn around and show some really positive things about yourself. And he'd said to Martin, the job in particular was driving a library van to deliver books and pick up books. And he'd said to Martin, can I ask, is it okay to smoke in my van?
Hey.
Like, it's sort of an unwritten rule here. You know not to ask that, but Martin was no, don't ask that question.
It was great to ask a question, but it probably wasn't one of the right ones. Yeah. It was halfway there. At least he was asking a question. Yeah. So how could that have been prevented, maybe? You know,
luckily it was prevented. With interview preparation.
That was our mock interview.
That was in the mock interview. Sorry, I missed that. Great. Right, great. So do you know, did he come up with a good question in the interview?
Well, I think he came across okay, but he didn't get through again. But at least it wasn't through smoking in the cab or his one.
And that's another one of the barriers for this candidate group as well, isn't it? It's just the level of exclusion, really, and invisibility. That it's so difficult for people to be shortlisted for jobs. Certainly that's my experience. And then it's even more difficult to be successful even when they've been interviewed. So in terms of motivation and self-confidence and self-worth, it's really challenging, isn't it, for clients and for us advisors as well, to try to support them not to give up. You know, and then of course the approach of job centre sometimes can be very challenging. Being a refugee in the UK, as we all know, is not a protected characteristic. They are even more invisible, that employers, particularly big employers, are not monitoring refugee engagement in their workforce. In contrast to, for example, people with disabilities or women, they'll have usually some kind of recording system of the success rate of people from different disadvantaged groups, but very rarely is refugee visible in their diversity and inclusion monitoring. So it is a very invisible group in the labour market at all skill levels.
I just wanted to point out, sorry, that Adele wrote something on the chat, which is actually quite important, which is about ESOL. And young.
Yeah, found that local provision is very sparse for progression groups and routes into sectors, for example, engineering. Yeah. There seems to be a gap in qualifications to get to university. There's no pre-access courses anymore. Yeah, students have significant ambitions, but the steps to get there are very difficult. Also the case for getting onto GCSE core subjects, maths and English. Yeah. What can I say? What can anyone say? Yes. So as an advisor, how can we kind of respond to that situation? Anyone? It is really challenging. When there's a gap, there's a gap. In my experience, it's about enabling the candidate to see that it's not personal, it's a systemic situation, and that they're facing this situation and many other people are as well. And then it's about being resilient and trying to see what the alternatives are. For example, as we were saying, the benefits of trying to get into the workplace on a placement or volunteering as another way to develop English, business English. But no, it's not good enough. And little agencies like us, like Transitions, we do a lot of lobbying. So I'm always having meetings with DWP and Home Office and with other refugee agencies to try to collaboratively increase the provision for refugees. If they're not on the settlement programme, of course, it's even worse. Just
I'd like to
time because it's 10 o'clock.
Oh, sorry.
No, come on, Jackie, just briefly.
Yeah, I was looking at because this is of young people. I was looking at that. I see someone has put functional skills, which is exactly what I was going to say, because I do understand that there's that difficulty. But maybe in colleges doing functional skills, and maybe if that young person is aspiring to go to university but has those barriers, there are other alternatives like apprenticeships, including high-level apprenticeships.
Yep.
And I know now I'm not up to date exactly what the government is doing now, which is kickstart into employment and all this. But I would certainly make links with your local job center, see what's offering them, make good links with the managers there. This is how I managed to find out when I was working about local things happening, including colleges. That was my only comment about that, because I know it's a very difficult one.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. And on the Transitions website, on the blog section, so that's on the tab called resources, there's a lot of information about the current government increases in support for job seekers and employers, and that includes something about the Kickstart programme. So we'll send that as a link after the workshop as well, if you don't already know about it. I'm sure most people do, but just in case. Right, so I'm now going to very briefly share some PowerPoint slides about Transitions work. I'll keep it as short as I can, and please just wave your hand. Will I be able to? Yes, I think so, yeah. If you've got a question during it or afterwards. So let me try and share my screen. Okay. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Just wait for the PowerPoint to open up. Okay, great. Can everyone see the slide?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah. If you have any trouble seeing it, just write on the chat. Oh, play from start, excuse me. Okay. So Transitions was set up 10 years ago because of the cuts in government programmes in the UK and in London. And it's still here, so we've survived. And as you can see, it specifically supports engineers, architects and business services refugee professionals in London. So people like HR officers, caseworkers, advisors, data scientists. That's basically the model. So at its core, it's a career guidance service, around 35 people at any one time, so it's very small. Only ever has 2 members of staff, sometimes 3, sometimes 1. So it's a lot of one-to-one casework. And the employer part of it is in the middle of this diagram. It's a 6-month paid return of placement programme. It's very small. We've only got 5 people on placement at the moment. Usually it's more than that, but with lockdown, things have slowed down a lot. So, you know, I'm pleased that at least we've got 5 people, an architect, 2 engineers, an HR person, an administrator. They're paid. When I first started running transitions, it was really hard to get paid placements, but the culture does seem to have changed. So if you're working on that and wondering, you know, should we be promoting people as volunteers or should they be paid? It's absolutely possible to generate paid fixed term placements. It's basically a fixed term job and they're hired by the employer. And we're paid to broker that and manage that. So as you can see, we charge £1,200 to broker and manage a 6-month placement. And then if they're retained, then we become you might call it a mainstream recruitment service. 15% of the gross salary fee is a mainstream fee. It's not a lot of money, and it's very high value, and we get around 70% of candidates being retained from placements onto long-term contracts, which is great, obviously, for the candidates and the employers and us. So last year and this year, those are employers who've paid us to manage placements. And the most recent one is City Fibre, just to let you know, and they're growing. So they're laying cables for internet connection. They've got a big government contract all over the country. So if you don't know about them, look them up. And I'm very happy to introduce you as well if you've got people who have any experience in telecoms or are looking for training. They've got a big training program as well. And they agreed to host placements with us. So someone's just started a couple of weeks ago on a 6-month placement. His salary is 29k. He's been out of work for 3 years. He's a Syrian civil engineer with 8 years experience in Syria. Job Centre hadn't helped him with anything. And this seems to be working really well for him and us as well. So that's all the companies and public sector employers who've worked with us over the last 10 years. So it's very possible if you're thinking, could we do something in social enterprise as a income generation employment service for service users and employers? And always happy to talk about it, share documents, not in competition with anyone. Here's some candidates. In recruitment speak, people are called candidates, whereas the employers are clients. It's taken me a while to get my head around that. So top left-hand corner, he's Syrian, Bashir. He's a fire engineer, shortage area in the UK. So he's now back at work in permanent employment. The woman next to him, she's Iranian, she's a geologist, and you can see she had a placement with Crossrail. She's back again as well. And person in the middle at the bottom, he's Iraqi. He's an electrical engineer. You can see he works for National Grid. So as we discussed earlier on, one of the reasons why we all do what we do is because refugees do tend to be very, very invisible. We will share these slides with you, I forgot to say. We'll share all of the resources. So an exercise described in this slide resulted in no interviews. So those are candidates who really are hireable. You know, nothing wrong with them, just the situation they're in. 2 experienced qualified, level 7 qualified career guidance staff assisting them. Still no interviews. Shocking, really. As we know, the British government really has very little to say or do in terms of refugee settlement, maybe with the, you know, exception of the Syrian resettlement programme, which is brilliant. But most of our candidates, almost all our candidates, are not on the settlement programme. They came here independently. Unemployment's the other reason we exist. As I'm sure you know, there are lots of statistics, but it is somewhere between 18 and 70% of people out of work or working but not using their core skills. In terms of engineering, I guess these statistics will have changed quite a lot in the last 6 months for obvious reasons, but there still is a shortage of engineers in the UK, and so unemployed refugee engineers ought to be snapped up, and they're not, so that's another reason why we exist. And of course, diversity and inclusion, there's loads of research to say that diversity is good for business. It's not necessarily a cost, it's an investment. And retention rates in diverse organisations are much higher than in organisations that are not diverse. So that's a summary. And of course, one of the big challenges for refugees is many of them have quite a big interruption. It's 2, 3, 4, 10 years gap on their CV, which is, it's a challenge to engage employers, as we've said, and a lack of entry points by employers for people with career gaps, which is why we run our returner placement programme. Loss of confidence and mutual cultural barriers, as we've mentioned. So for transitions, everyone was already a professional overseas before they had to come to the UK. And interestingly, we're finding more and more people come to us having gone back to UK university and either redone their original degree and or taken a UK master's, and are still finding that they can't find employment. So the big barrier seems to be lack of UK experience, or the perception by employers that the person needs UK experience, which Rakeem will talk about. So we've got this thing called a milestones action plan, and these are 10 milestones, which we'll share with you. Not rocket science, I'm sure none of them are a surprise to any of you. So candidates discuss each of those with us, and it's not one by one, it's a different order for each person. That's one of the challenges, isn't it, of working with candidates who have such sort of complex barriers, is where to start and how to record it and how to measure it. So we use this 10-point milestones model, and so on our database, each of these 10 points has a record point, and we can tag it when a candidate has, you might say, made some progress in one or several of these 10 points. And as we all know, it's all about reviewing, you know, caseload management and discussing each candidate with colleagues and making sure that weaker candidates don't get left behind. It's very easy to work more with the stronger candidates because they're in touch more often. So that's something about our placement model. It's a partnership model, putting together a role description with the employer and managing the process with them. And one of the case studies looks at that. You probably know Arup, a design consultancy. They designed the Sydney Opera House. So this was an Iranian candidate who was struggling a lot, who was working in retail, and now working on a permanent contract with Arup as a result of the placement. And quite soon into his placement, he was training his colleagues on a piece of software called Power BI, because he'd used it a lot in Iran, and in the UK, his colleagues hadn't used it before. This is how we supported the employers, the colleagues. There's a handbook, regular meetings, and similar for Network Rail. 2 Syrians and an Afghani there. You probably noticed lots of men, not enough women. Always trying to attract more women. So that's a gallop through transitions. Are there any big questions or small questions? I'll just stop the share. Right, yeah. Happy to take some questions for a couple of minutes. Yep, Alexandra, yeah.
I'm just wondering, in terms of Wales, do you cover Wales at all, or?
So Transitions itself is just the 33 London boroughs. We're really small, yeah. But we're running a Big Lottery funded project in Manchester with Refugees and Mentors community interest company in Manchester, where the Big Lottery have basically paid for Transitions to cascade the whole model to Manchester. Yeah. So always interested in things like that. But I mean, in the meantime, you know, please phone, email, and you know, really happy to share materials and the model.
For Wales, I think that's my biggest challenge with my customers is that gap between they've got the qualifications, I've gone through NARIC with them, they've had it translated,
Yes.
because they haven't got the experience.
Yeah.
Or it's long. It's just getting that experience, especially if it's action like engineering or quite specific. That's a challenge.
Definitely, yeah. Traditionally in engineering, it's been very sort of white, male, British, and in many, the infrastructure sector like rail, many of the jobs until the last 10, 20 years were handed down from father to son, which I hadn't realised. It's a really quite a closed market. And so many of the recruiters, when they look at someone, they haven't a clue what to do with it. And they just make this kind of assumption. The person doesn't have UK experience, therefore they can't do my job, this job, And so NARIC, the National Academic Recognition Information Centre, there's a guide on the Transitions website. They give an informed opinion of someone's equivalence of their academic qualification. And usually it's okay, isn't it? It's quite rare for it to be seen as a diploma of higher education. Usually they're seen as equivalent. Doesn't make much difference though to employers, as you said, Alexandra.
I've got a partnership for Careers Wales with NARIC. Offer so Careers Wales, we're doing a trial pilot where we're paying for the NARIC.
Great. Lovely. It's about £70, isn't it?
Yeah, because it is quite pretty, and that in itself was a bit of a barrier as well.
It can be,
So I've managed to get that ball going. So far it's okay. So hopefully that's
Do you know RefuAid and Restart as well?
No.
So they're 2 national charities, and they were started a couple of years ago, basically by 2 family trusts, specifically to assist refugees with requalification. So they, the candidate can apply to them, or you can apply to them to pay for NARIC, and also for professional body membership fees. And they assist refugee health professionals a lot with the PLAB exams. So RefuAid and Restart. We'll share that afterwards as well.
There's Claire has written something.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you
read it out? How do you make strong employer links to find these placements?
Oh great question. There isn't a simple answer. We've run 26 seminars, which are free seminars, and they're half-day events hosted by employers and professional bodies, or hosted by us, and inviting organisations to speak, so employers to speak, or professional bodies, or job centre, always a candidate speaking, a little bit from us, to try to enable people to engage and ask questions in a safe space. So events, peer coaching, started doing that a lot more in the last couple of years. And that's opened a few doors where the coach who works for an employing organisation has realised, okay, a work placement would really help this person, and they've approached their own employer. So that's one way. Cold contacting organisations, going on to LinkedIn. Recruiters don't often get it, unfortunately. A lot of them are on targets and they're just, you might say, picking low-hanging fruit. And they don't want to invest the time into learning about NARIC, for example. But finding diversity and inclusion managers, CSR managers, people right at the top, which I'm quite uncomfortable with. I prefer to try and collaborate with frontline recruiters and hiring managers, but actually I've found you do need the people at the top to give people permission to consider work placements and find a budget for it, obviously. Speaking at any event you possibly can, commenting on LinkedIn. There isn't an easy way. Every single placement really has been quite a challenge. Sometimes people hear about the service from other organisations. So once you've got some momentum going, hopefully through them business networks, one HR manager will tell another HR manager. That's certainly how Arcadis came to us, and they've hosted 17 placements. So that comes down to, how do you have time? It needs a member of staff who has allocated time to employer engagement, which costs money. But yeah, a budget for employer engagement, and somebody who has the skills and confidence to get through all the smoke and mirrors. You know, anyone can apply to us. We will offer people interview practice, but that's not enough. You know, we need work placements. So yeah, it isn't easy, but you can see it's possible. If you don't mind, if we move on to the case studies, because also that will continue this discussion of things to think about running placement. One of the case studies is about running placements, and the other is about managing candidates' expectations. So Ashley, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Hi Ashley. Yeah. So I think everybody has been emailed the case studies, and Ashley's going to divide us into two random groups with Jackie and I in one each. And Jackie and I will try to share the case studies on the screen as well. And you might want to choose one rather than the other. Totally up to you in your group. So one is more about managing placements, and the other is about managing candidate expectations. If we could come back here.
There is, have you got your name and email, and I can find the direct link to it and I'll email it to you?
Or about 20 to 11, so we could just have a discussion about it. Okay, Ashley, could you put us into groups, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Unfortunately, we did not get to case study 2.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, we just covered the first one as well.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, right.
Yeah. So welcome to Rakim, who I can see has joined us.
Good morning. Thank you.
We've still got 5 minutes just to briefly review what we've discussed, and that's good that all of us just looked at the first case study. So Jackie, does you or someone in the group just want to summarize the key points?
Yes, Alexandra's made notes, very kindly made notes, because unfortunately Claire, we couldn't hear her, so she typed things out.
Right.
And I couldn't see,
Okay.
I couldn't see what she was typing. So, but we all managed to work together in a nice team. So I'll be quiet now.
Sorry, do you want me to just go through each 3 points, or?
Just some key points. If you pick out maybe 3 or 4 of the main things.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for the candidate, we said possibly language difficulty, they weren't selling themselves properly, lack of confidence, lack of practice, and the research for the company as well. And in terms of the employer, we said that there may have been a better match for the position. There may have been cultural, so the cultural fit of the candidate with the company itself. We discussed that there could be unconscious biases involved.
Yeah.
And then we went on then to say how we'd support the organisation and the refugee. So we'd say there'd be possibly diversity and inclusion workshops, training, educating both employee and the organisation and the candidate as well on differences.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we also said about how if HR organised the interview and how if they've organised it because they've previously done it for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's important that the candidate doesn't assume that it's that person who's interviewing them on the panel. So I thought that was a really good point to remember as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, great. Would someone from our group like to just add anything? Helen?
The main thing we discussed was that the people interviewing didn't seem to have a handle on what they were actually interviewing for. They took the perception they were interviewing for a normal job role, but actually this was about a placement opportunity to bridge the gap of lack of experience, lack of UK experience, and it wasn't fully understood, which was where the whole thing seemed to fall down. So there could be obviously things you could do to prepare your client, but in that situation, really the key to it is the understanding of the interviewers of what the purpose of the role is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as I've mentioned, this doesn't often happen. Most placement interviews go well, but maybe 20% of the time there's this kind of hiccup, which is really upsetting for everyone, obviously. So, yeah. Great. And one strategy that we use is to assist the candidates to produce a set of slides, which is a sneaky way for me to introduce Rakeen. So, so in each interview, the person presents a set of slides that cover each one of those 10 milestone points that we talked earlier on. And employers love it because it's a really sort of practical, visual, colourful, engaging way of the candidate presenting their profile, and it definitely helps. I would recommend it. Rakeen, thank you so much for taking time out from your job today.
Good morning. Can you hear me properly?
If I just hand over to you, I've suggested that maybe people ask you questions towards the end, if that's okay. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. And are you happy to share your screen?
Yes, I am. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Yeah, great. Yeah. It might take a while, don't worry, because there's so many. I wonder if we all switch our videos off, it might help as well.
Can you see my screen now? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can now.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me on this meeting. My name is Rahim Girikhanov. I am a qualified civil engineer, and I'm going to share my experience of being a refugee and trying to restart my career here in the UK. As I said, I'm a civil engineer. I studied in Russia in university for 5 years. And my specialization is technology organization and economics of construction production. And my diploma is comparable to British bachelor degree according to UK NARIC. So by the time when I had to leave my country, I had about 5 years of experience in civil engineering. I worked on a huge construction projects in St. Petersburg and Moscow. For example, in St. Petersburg, I worked on a Congress and Exhibition Center as a technical and financial control specialist. It was a really huge project. As I said, Congress and Exhibition Center, the biggest in Europe. And also I worked in projects on projects in Moscow, residential complex, sport complexes. Yeah, I worked as in most cases, investor hired me to check the investments in on a project. I started just very briefly about my career development back in Russia. I started, my first position was a foreman in 2012. And in 2016, I managed to get the position of head of technical and financial control team. And very briefly, just about my responsibilities, I did an internal and external technical and financial controls, inspected sites, checked technical quality and quantity of work and materials, and the workmanship, met building standards and regulations. I worked with estimates, invoices, and final accounts. So there was a bit of technical and financial aspects. I had to communicate with legal team, with financial team, had to communicate with different stakeholders, and also manage a team at my last job there. And at the end of any project, I wrote technical and financial audit reports. So yeah, I got a position of head of team in 2016 and was working in 2017 at the same position. And I was quite happy about how my career was developing, and I quite enjoyed my work. All the pictures, by the way, you're seeing on presentation, is the projects where I worked on. It was really interesting projects. So, but things can change in life. In the end of 2017, I had to leave my country, and I came to the UK in November of 2017. After 6 months, I got a residence permit. I think I was quite lucky to get it in 6 months. Many people, many refugees wait for a longer period. So I've got a right to work, but there was a problem. I didn't speak English. It was really limited at that time. So in December of 2018, I was lucky to get a place in a really good English school here in London. After a few months, I started applying for jobs, which was in engineering field. So I didn't have any success at that time. And about after 7 months, since I started learn English at that school, I contacted Transitions. It was in end of June or beginning of July of 2019. So Transitions helped me with CV writing, with interview techniques, invited me to various of workshops. And in December of 2019, I got a one-year return on placement contract confirmation with Network Rail. And yeah, it happened with support of Transitions because they invited me on a workshop where Network Rail specialists. So, and in February of this year, I started, the placement started, and I think I was lucky again because it started just 4 weeks before lockdown, and I had a chance to see my colleagues in real, because now we are working at home, and I think it would be a bit more difficult if I didn't see them in real before going to lockdown. So just a few words about consequences of having refugee experience in employment field. So the biggest problem, I think, it's having no UK experience, because most of employers want you to have UK experience. Also, gap in a career, I think, another problem. And the third problem is lack of confidence to restart career, because after a while of you applying again and again and when you don't get even an invitation to interview, you just start feeling that you're about to give up of applying. So very briefly about current situation. It's been about 7 months since I joined Network Rail, and I'm working there as an assistant engineer in structures team and Milton Keynes. So I involved in reviewing standards and best practice reports and identifying links and gaps in some current processes of management of structures, and quite much work with data from different databases, again analyzing it and giving some solutions how to improve current processes. Also, I involved in reviewing standards, and on a monthly basis, I review incidents reports on structures and prepare reports for national safety briefings. So it's very briefly about current situation and some benefits of the placement. So it's definitely at the first place, it's gaining UK experience, which is essential for most of positions in the UK. And reflective learning, I learn every day something new, which makes me feel more confident. Also, my manager at Network Rail became my IC mentor, and it's good for me to do IC professional body stuff, because if you have more chances to get a job, to get an interview invitation when you can write in your CV that you are a member of a professional body. Also, I think it's good that I got access to internal job adverts at Network Rail, which increases my chances to get a permanent position at this company. Also, networking and, as I mentioned, rebuilding confidence. But there is, in return placements, benefits not only for employee. There is some benefits for employer, as I think. So they get experienced professional. And the second point is a new view on activities processes. And I can say that my manager very actively using this second point. Almost since first day, my manager asked me to review some incident reports and to find solutions how to change this situation. And I've been working on, for example, on vegetation management. It's a really big problem on railway here in the UK. And yeah, he asked me to do it on because I'm from other country. I worked in other country, and I have a different view on things. And he can see that, and I can see, the box can see that it worked quite well. And this work I've been doing, going to become a quite huge project and report, which will change some processes around the company. So, and yeah, actually employers get also a keen to learn employee. I can say that if not all, that almost every refugee really want to restart their careers and ready to work hard to restart their careers. So, yeah, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Raheem. That was a really, really effective presentation. Thank you. So yeah, feel free to ask questions, people. Don't forget to unmute. Perhaps.
I've got a question.
Yep.
Raheem, it's Faisal here.
Yeah.
The recruitment process, how different was it from overseas where you've obviously worked and to UK, the whole process of you getting a job?
It was really, really different. And for me, it personally was different because of two reasons. One reason, it's different in Russia in generally. Even everything is different. Even interview technique is different. You build your, for example, here you build your. A candidate built his answers on a star-based system, but in Russia, I've never heard about this technique, for example. And interview in Russia can be much shorter. Yeah, and there is also no professional bodies in Russia. No one never want you to be a member of professional body. So yeah, and also for me it was difficult here because I hadn't had interview in Russia for when I came to the UK for last 3 or 4 years, because I was promoting and getting new positions by word of mouth. Is called here by someone recommended me because of my previous job. So yeah. And
the Network Rail interview was a very robust interview, wasn't it? It was done on skills-based, competency-based questions using the job description. So
yes, yes, and actually it was really different from what I used to do in Russia in terms of interviews, but because transitions helped me and prepared me, I was ready for that interview, I think, quite well. And even I'm quite, I was actually really happy after the interview, but I was happy because first thing, I was really well prepared, really well advised by transitions about techniques, and also I met one of interviewee I met on workshop before, and also both of them were really friendly, and it helped me, I think, quite much. I don't know. I mean, being a interview is friendly, I think it's playing a really big role in interview process for refugee specialists, because as I mentioned, there is a really big lack of confidence. Yeah.
Network Rail wanted it to succeed, and so they prepared their staff very properly as well, and they weren't trying to fast track you through the system and kind of give you a job that you didn't deserve, but they wanted it to be a professional interview where it was fair and you had a chance to succeed based on your skills.
They did very well. Yeah.
Great. If you just raise your hand if anyone else has a question.
Just got one more. Sorry, go on.
Martin?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Rakeem, you had a point where you'd applied for a lot of jobs and you were unsuccessful. Now we have quite a few refugees in the same position. What advice would you give them, or also like to build up resilience, or what techniques did you do?
I think it's very, it's easy to say don't give up. Yeah, but I would say in terms of not giving up, a good mentor, a good advisor, career advisor helped me, and workshops which Transitions invited me on helped me as well, because I met other refugees there, and I saw that I'm not alone at that position in this situation, and I saw real people who been on my position, but they managed to get a job. And I thought, okay, I should continue it, and gave me some power, some hope. Yeah, I think communicating between refugees who had a good experience, it's very important.
Cool.
Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah, just one more. During your slides, you mentioned gaps in years. How did you manage to cover that? Make sure the employers.
Sorry, can you
the
repeat?
gap in years? How did you manage to cover that bit? Did you do any training courses on the side? So.
Gap in my career, you mean?
Yeah.
No, why I had a gap? Because every refugee going to have a gap, because for some it's going to be short, for some it's going to be longer.
It's a question about transferable skills, Rakeem. How closely your existing skills have.
Sorry.
That's fine.
In some work I'm doing now at Network Rail, my skills really helped me to do that job. As I mentioned, for example, in reviewing standards and some processes, analyzing some data, some reports, it really helps me. But also, back in Russia, I had to communicate with different people from different departments, and having these skills there helps me to communicate with people here. Even it's a bit harder here for me because of language barrier sometimes, but anyway, it helps me. Yeah.
Well,
I hope it was clear answer.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. Yeah, Martin.
I was just going to ask you, you mentioned that you had a particularly good English language school. Why? What made it good? What was good about it?
Can you repeat, please, Martin?
Right, you had you mentioned that you attended a good English language school.
Yeah.
What made it particularly good?
Again, people, staff working at that school, they were really friendly, and they were really keen to help me. And yeah, I felt they're very comfortable, and it helped me. I think it's really feeling comfortable in any situation. I think it's really important for any refugee, because you're displaced from your country, from a normal situation for you, and there are many things which was unfriendly for most of refugees along the way, and feeling safe and in comfortable, friendly environment, it makes your mind relax, and then you can focus on learning and other things.
Yeah.
The experience of having to move countries is extremely stressful, isn't it? And no one should forget that. Yeah, thank you. Jackie?
Yeah, I just wanted to read Claire's, what she wrote. She asked the question, how did you learn English so quickly?
You know, actually people, other refugees ask me this question quite often. I had, my classes was from 9:15 in the morning till 1:20 afternoon. And what I did after that, of course, I attended every single day, every single lesson. And after that, I directly went to some coffee shop and I reviewed all the lesson I had in the morning. And I had a really big notebook when I wrote all new words which I studied in the morning, and I repeated. I like walking, and when I was walking I had this notebook and I just was repeating these words, and I wrote them down in context of sentences, a few sentences for one new word, and I was just walking in the parks and repeating a word and using it in a sentences. And just if someone saw me, they would say that I'm a bit crazy talking with myself, but it helped me really much.
Yeah. Very good.
Thank you.
Time for one more question. Maybe if I just put one in, and then if someone else wants to ask a question as well, please do. Rakim, so this morning, obviously you're with a community of career advisors. All of us are career advisors. Do you have some advice and suggestions for how career services can support refugees in the UK even better? People of all skill levels and all backgrounds?
I think what I would say, I think anyone, and career advisors as well, should understand that for people having refugee status, refugee experience, it's very important to be a really good mentor, to show that you are friendly, and maybe even repeat it at your every meeting, to show that you're friendly, and repeat that you know that it's difficult, but we will get through that together. Some kind of maybe mental support, I think it's important. I guess with like with any people who had some difficulties in life, because I comparing to Russia, I see that career specialists in the UK, their techniques much better than compared to their colleagues in Russia. The only thing I think it's to remember that we refugees had some bad experience, and we need to see that people are friendly and someone supporting us. Yeah.
Thank you.
And one more point, maybe. When you communicate with employers, to remember to let them know that there is, for example, on return of placements, there is not benefits only for employees, but there can be some benefits for them as well.
Mm.
Yeah. Sheila, you muted.
Sorry, yeah. Thank you. To highlight, as you said before, that individuals bring their skills and experience with them. They don't leave them behind. And that these often are better, certainly different from experience in the UK. And so that's a business benefit. It's not charity, it's about running a sustainable organisation to be diverse.
Yes, absolutely. And as I said, my manager used my previous experience very well. He asked me to do work which they never would get done because they don't have enough staff to do that job, because their daily work is quite much they have to do, but they also want to change some processes. And me being from different country, having a different experience, he using quite well, and they're going to get a really good benefit on it.
Great. One more question, if someone has a question. I think you did such a great job on your presentation, Rakim. So, yeah. I'm going to ask one more question. This is a horrible interview question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Oh, in 5 years' time, I see myself working in civil engineering field in a good position and feeling as comfortable as I felt back in my country. I also see myself a chartered membership of relevant professional body. Yeah.
Good. Best of luck. So far, so good.
Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah. And as we all know, this is very much a market-driven economy. So it's all about sort of self-branding, isn't it? And communicating, the business value that we all have to our employers. But so far, so good. And I'm sure you're going to be a great mentor to other people as well as you settle back into your career.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much all.
Yeah, I think, are you going to stay with us, Rakim, or do you have to go back to work?
I think I have to go because I'm having in half an hour a one-to-one meeting with my manager. I have to do some preparations for that. Yeah. Thank you very much all.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very interesting.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you, Rakim. Good luck.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Great. So he did a presentation at Arup as well before he found the job with Network Rail, and he was much more nervous. So he referred quite a lot there, I think, to mental health, and for sure, whatever happened to him, it must have been pretty awful. It's a thing to remember. Yeah.
I like to, sorry to interrupt you, Sheila, that even though we haven't touched on it in this workshop, because I mean, you could have days and days, and Sheila and I have been working in this sector in years to specialize in giving advice for refugees, but we will send out some information in terms of the area of well-being and mental health. And also, I do think someone was asking about young people. So we're also going to include some information about unaccompanied children, which would also include young people and what services may be available for them. We don't have it here because we were focusing on a specific area, but that will come out in the handout. There isn't a lot, but at least there's some things in different parts. It's patchy, like everything. But we will be sending that out.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Adele mentioned as well about trying to work with the local authority and also building up a local IAG group. And certainly in London, we've got a group called the Refugee Careers Advisors Network, RCAN, and it meets about 3 times a year. It has no funding at all, but it still works. Organisations take it in turns to host it. Of course, we've been running it on Zoom this year. And I found it really, really helpful as a support network to ask colleagues, this has happened, what can I do? We've got a terms of reference so we can talk about clients, so do case studies in those meetings. We've invited Job Centre colleagues to come and talk with us. So if you're not already doing that, that can be really helpful to build up a voluntary network of other career advisors around refugee support. Are there other things that you guys are doing that we haven't mentioned that we can learn from? Things that you've done that maybe didn't work. We tried a temp agency before we came up with this model of 6-month placements and retention, and it was a disaster. Lots of disappointed candidates and lots of money to set that project up. We found that the refugees just couldn't respond quick enough. I got some roles in administration for temp jobs, and the person needed to start really quickly. You know, it's a temp job, and there were too many difficulties that the candidates were facing to engage with a temporary service. So I wouldn't recommend that unless you can find better ways of doing it. Yeah, Helen.
One of the challenges that Martin and I feel in our area is that sometimes the job centres aren't coming from a standardised approach. It depends on the individual work coach or the individual manager at that centre. Yeah. Sometimes Martin and I have learned from experience, dare I say it, not to be too honest. Because sometimes if you're really upfront about what you're trying to arrange for a client, their rules and regulations might, depending on the work coach, might stop you and be the barrier to their progression. So for example, they try and keep all the clients, including our refugee clients, the same, which means the rule comes into play that they should only be allowed an 8-week work placement.
Yep.
Now, some of the employer engagers within certain job centres in County Durham are really strict with that and say, no, it has to be the same for your refugee clients. They can do no more than 8 weeks. And we try to explain, for example, how can you imagine going to a Middle Eastern country and learning to be a barber in Arabic in 8 weeks? It's not possible. Yeah. Whereas other work coaches in other areas have been really flexible and said, right, we understand you can't do it in 8 weeks, we'll give you 8 months. Or they've been much more flexible, and we've had success of people going into work. So they've been on an extended work placement and it's worked. Yeah. What we're trying to do now, or what our managers are trying to do, is speak to the job centre managers to say, look, it works. Extend the placement. It's not the same for everyone. It isn't a level playing field. Yeah. They're dealing with the language barrier and trying to learn new skills off the changing careers, and we're trying to make that more equal.
Yes, yeah. And so, as you just mentioned, actually job centre staff do have much more flexibility than they let on. It's easier for them not to be flexible. You know, they don't have paperwork to fill in, but they can be, yeah. And the government apparently has put loads more money into the flexible support fund for job centre staff to spend on assisting people with suits for interviews. You know, even on Zoom, you have to look smart for an interview. but they often won't tell people that the Flexible Support Fund even exists. So advocacy is a big thing with Job Centre. Yeah, Faisal, I think you've had quite good experiences with your job centres. Is that right?
Yep. So we work, when I'm working with RENACE candidates, we directly work with job centres. So we have contact with work coaches there. So you help. So I think it takes a bit of time to build that relation, to build that kind of understanding where they would contact us directly if one of our candidates needed extra support. They needed to share some information. So
it's worth spending a job centre if
Yep.
you want to be local in one particular borough or two. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not far off 25 past. And Jackie has very kindly put together a document about career theory as well, the dreaded career theory. So we'll share that as well. 3 particular theories. Jackie, do you want to just spend just a couple of minutes just highlighting the names of the 3 theories?
Okay, it's basically, and you probably have heard it before, but I thought it was very relevant for the times we living now, particularly under the pandemic and complete uncertainty. And it's the 2 main ones which I was thinking of or reflected on was Plan Happenstance. I don't know if you've heard of it, right? And from Krumboltz, which is about basically, you know, you have it's about flexibility, it's about seizing opportunities and not having a very specific plan, because as we know, things can completely change, and also about learning, that attitude to always want to learn and train, and as we know, learning is not just academic learning, it's all the other type of learning, like we're doing now. Even in LinkedIn, there's so many things you can learn about, new ideas and things like that. So I will actually send you a document with some links which are quite relevant if you hadn't heard about Plan Happenstance, so you just need to want to refresh, because I thought that was a good way of framing what's happening and maybe to help us in terms of our engagement with clients. And the other one is the chaos theory from Bright, Pryor and Bright. And that again is contrary to our assumption that our life, as we know, we think it's linear, as we know it isn't, and that careers are not linear. It's very much about how to manage transition and change, and about that the future, if we assume, because we can't control the future. I mean, I'm not talking with the converted, but again, talking to this or maybe reflecting on this with clients about not being able to manage the future, particularly now, that is okay. That is okay not to be able to manage it, but what can we learn from our path, the famous transferable skills, building, which I think if we hear what our candidate was explaining, building on that resilience, right, to manage transition and change. Again, about we're not defined necessarily, as we know, about our job. It's about our identities. I do think, even though we have seen an example of someone who's moved back to their own sector, for some cases that might not necessarily be viable, or maybe they've seen other things they've never done before, and that's okay. That maybe in more traditional settings, you think, well, if I studied this, I need to be this. And again, to say famous things like portfolio career, which it sounds like that it's so alien for most people unless we're in this sector, and that's okay. And it's the other thing, which I think that is very key, and he said it, is that looking for job, and this will be even more, is a job in itself, how to deal with rejection. Because I think that's one of the worst feelings we can have, is feeling rejected. And so again, as career advisors, and as he said, mentors and career advisors, we have such a key role and on being in that, I guess, journey when things are low, not just in the highs. I don't know how much time you're
Yeah.
allocated to see your clients, but anyway, that I will send the document. And the last one is a model which is going on from social capital. Is a model called career capital, meaning, again, a little bit what the example of our previous speaker said about losing all your contacts, losing everybody in your professional, not just your family and social, and having to regain them here, and how to help with that. And that is so important, to be able to speak with other engineers or other nurses or other people of your own sector, barbers. Yeah. So that was just in a nutshell. I hope it made some sense. The 3 areas which I thought was relevant to maybe what clients might be going through, and us as career advisors. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie, and thanks for writing that up on a short document as well, which we'll share with everybody with all the links on it. It's great. Yeah. Okay, so we've just got a couple of minutes before we all have to go in our different directions.
Oh, I see something.
If we just go back to maybe the objectives on the programme, and just see if there is anything else to quickly mention.
Sorry, there's a question, sorry, on the chat.
Okay, yeah, sure.
It was just on behalf of Claire. She's got a question in the chat saying, how would you suggest to clients to build transferable skills in the current COVID climate where voluntary opportunities are closed down? I'm finding the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. People are wanting, I've got a young man who really wants to do a work placement linked with the job centre, and only charity shops are open, and none of the employers that previously linked with the job centre to offer the work experiences are available.
Yeah, it is a huge challenge, isn't it? Using all the networks that we've got and using relevant sites like Do It that advertise voluntary opportunities around the country, Do-It. There'll be some there that can be delivered remotely. It's not impossible. You know, we've got 5 candidates working remotely now, as well as Rakim. So it's just very difficult. Yeah. Yeah, there's no denying that. Yeah. Self-advocacy, perhaps, a workshop with candidates to discuss this, you know, how can they try to broker their own voluntary opportunities, where can they look, how can they present themselves, how could they use LinkedIn for that, making new contacts, contacting organisations cold. It's a process of trying and reviewing with the clients, I think, to build up strategies and empower them to be in charge of that process as much as possible.
Sorry, I was also thinking maybe some of the candidates, I mean, I know it's so difficult because I'm working in schools, but maybe some of the candidates, if anything, if they involved with something with the school, because then if it's voluntary work, it still will account for something. If they were in the interview, they'll say, well, what did you do during COVID time, where I maybe volunteered, made cakes. I'm just thinking out of the box, honestly. Yeah. But something that shows that you weren't just at home.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And the point that I made about people who, many candidates don't have computers, they're trying to do everything on their mobile phone. Yeah, seeing if there are any refugee agencies that are funded by the European Union or Big Lottery who can help. So, for example, Renacy, Faisal works for Renacy on their BBO project and some other projects. They've managed to fund a computer for one of the transitions candidates, and it was only because I started collaborating with Renacy that I discovered this. So there are hidden pots of money, often from European Union, that are often unspent as well because people don't know about them, you know. So trying to find out which projects are funded by European Union and Big Lottery in your area. Do you know about them? We've got 1 more minute, then we better stop because everyone has work to do.
I just wanted to say, if you have candidates who are disabled and looking for work, there's access to work that funds lots of things. I'm just putting that there because that is another pot of money.
Yes.
In terms of computers or other specialist things if they have a disability.
Administered by Job Centre, is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can speak to your work coach at Job Centre. They have access to those resources.
Yeah.
Someone who has a disability.
I know it's complicated. I know.
Right. So Claire asked for resources, so we will definitely share all the resources, including things on funding. And if you have any resources that you'd be willing to share with other people as a result of this workshop, if you could either send them to Ashley at CDI or to myself or Jackie, and we'll share them with everyone else, that'd be brilliant. So I don't know if CDI are going to ask for feedback. I presume they are. We're always welcome to feedback, so please send any comments, suggestions. That would be really great. And take care, everybody. Stay safe. And great to meet you. Maybe we'll meet.
Yeah, thank you.
One day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.